Welcome back to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. Today we have another listener episode, returning with Laura Rock and Janice Palaganas. And ladies, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves briefly in a moment. The episode today is about the greatest barrier to really good conversation. And we're going to, spoiler alert, say that it is failing to be transparent about what you're thinking. A lot of people really don't like to share their deeper concerns or what they're worried about. And in the episode, we contrasted what sometimes is called the mystery mastery approach to conversation, which is I'm going to keep my thoughts and feelings and concerns a mystery while unilaterally trying to master you, versus collaborative inquiry. And the workout of the week this week was another mental rehearsal, which is it asked us to think of something we might disclose that we might not normally, like a point of view or a goal that we have in a certain situation. And the bonus workout was if you do a good scene assessment and you think it's reasonably safe, you could actually share your thinking transparently.
What if building leadership and connection skills in real life was less about grand epiphanies and more about small, consistent reps? The way athletes train, the way musicians practice, the way simulation refines teaming and clinical performance. Push ups, sit ups, building up your cardio. We put challenges and weights in front of ourselves to get fit. We embrace no pain, no gain. Yet when we find something difficult in real life, especially an interpersonal something, we often skitter away. We put down the weight and walk away from the workout. Curious Now helps us lean into those everyday interactions, the awkward silences, simmering tensions, and high stakes conversations, and treat them like reps in a leadership gym. Curious Now, stronger later.
So, Laura Rock, Janice Palaganas, can I ask you to introduce yourselves?
Hello, Jenny. So happy to be here. I'm an intensive care doctor and pulmonologist at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. And I do a lot of teaching and research and consulting related to communication in healthcare.
And that was the voice of Dr. Laura Rock. Janice.
Hi, everyone. Jenny, thanks for having me. I'm Janice Palaganas. I'm the founding director of the IHP Center of Excellence in Healthcare Simulation Research. I'm a professor of health professions education at Massachusetts General Hospital. IHP stands for Institute of Health Professions and also principal investigator of the Rebel Lab, where we study the cognitive science of feedback conversations. So excited to be here.
So, welcome back, Janice and Laura. And boy, I know the three of us over many years, probably a decade, have all struggled with when and how to share what we're thinking. Sometimes I think we can worry that we're going to be too bossy or too controlling, or it's going to make us vulnerable in some way. And I think the real dilemma of the workout of the week is practicing what and how to share things that can potentially be transformative to the situation we're in. And the thing I shared in the episode was that there's a real paradox here. We often think that withholding our judgment, withholding our reasoning, not telling people what we're thinking creates an opening for them to share what they're thinking. And it certainly can. But more often than not, it creates a context where people are trying to guess what we are thinking and wondering where we're coming from. And it kind of degrades their sense of psychological safety. So it's a sort of paradoxical situation. Ladies, we've been talking about how to be transparent and what are the things that we think when we struggle with this. But to really get down to brass tacks of the workout of the week, I think it would be helpful if we each shared something that we're considering disclosing, but we're worried about it for some reason. And so there might be two parts of your share, like what are you thinking of disclosing? And then why are you worried about it? Or whatever you like. I can start. So, one of the things that I struggle with the most in disclosing or sharing my point of view, especially in my personal life, is when is it my business and when is it not my business? When am I veering into someone else's lane? And if I am veering into someone else's lane, is it still worth it?
Mm,
So, I had a conversation with somebody recently about some behavior change stuff that they were struggling with. And I had a great idea of the approach that they should take from a recent book that I had read. And I didn't share it. And my reason was I was like, is this my business or not my business? And I even thought this, although the person has told me on multiple occasions, I wish you gave me more feedback, Jenny.
mm.
Um, so that was my hesitancy.
I
How
have
about,
so many examples in my head, and I mean, I think my friends and family and even people I work with would be surprised to hear me say this because I have this reputation of like just saying what I think. But there are so many examples in my head of things I wish I could say, but I feel like too, I don't know, like I hold back. And so I guess I'll go with something at work. I I want to do more daily debriefing in our unit, and change is hard, and I feel like everyone's busy and sometimes I want to gather the unit and say, hey, let's just debrief the day. And I just feel like, ugh, they're going to think it's dumb and, everyone's too busy and change is hard. And so I'm afraid like people just either won't want to and won't do it, or they'll just think I'm lame and, you know, they'll do it, but they'll be annoyed. So I think that's an example where I sometimes hold back on, suggesting something that I think would be helpful for the team.
hmm, Janice, you got one?
Yeah, I think for me, what holds me back the most is it's the context, but the context of the people. Um, Knowing what triggers people and trying so very hard not to hit that trigger button really holds me back. And so it actually, I'm going to tell you a quick story. It happened this morning. Gianna, okay, 18-year-old daughter, you just don't tell an 18-year-old what to wear. It's her trigger button, right? And she's working as a caretaker this summer, and she keeps putting on these shirts that have like print, like words on it, and just doesn't look professional. And I've called her on it a couple times, and then she's late for work because she has to change because mom doesn't think it's professional, whatever. And and then I asked her again this morning, and she had said, you just really don't know my job. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And she was like, Mom, I work with people who are on food stamps. And that just triggered me. I was like, I don't care who you work with. Like, wear look professional. I don't care about that. Like, you should get in that practice. You're building your professional career. And then she I asked, like, I don't get it, why that shouldn't matter. You should still look professional. And she had said, well, the men that I work with like to make comments on how pretty I look. And if I wear a shirt without text, you could actually see my bra lines. And I don't want attention in that way. And that blew me away. It was like, okay, you can wear all the printed shirts you want to wear.
Pulling us back to what don't I know?
Yeah. Wow. Cross episode fertilization.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So we all have things that hold us back. And I think it's cool in a way that we're trying to be judicious. But what's the line between judicious and too cautious? I don't have the answer today, but I think that's something we could circle back to. Part of the reason that invited you both on for this particular series of topics is I know you both work within teams where you are trying to build a culture of transparently sharing what your goals are and trying to mutually support each other and be the best you can be the best team you can be on the ICU or be the best team you can be in a research team, Janice. So you say, can we actually teach it? And I mentioned this in our earlier episode. You're a CrossFit coach, among other things. So you help people lift heavy things from the ground and you help them stay safe while they do it. I think this is a heavy lift also of learning to be transparent. What are your thoughts about that struggle for yourself or other people?
But I think it's so funny that you're using that analogy because that is so at play at the gym when people want to lift weights and they will not admit that it is too heavy for them. And I think it's kind of the same thing in social actions and interactions is when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to just stop and say, whoa, this is too heavy for me.
So that in a way is part of this workout of the week, which is undiscussable are often our own awkwardness. Like, I'm thinking this, I feel very awkward about it. I better cover that up versus I feel really awkward about this. And I am going to tell you, just even bringing this up is very awkward. So I'm wondering, what is your experience for yourselves in what have been the rewards potentially that have allowed you to push through that awkwardness or tolerate that discomfort to share something about what you're thinking or your goals, and then that works. I think if you get rewarded for that, it can also backfire or get snuffed out if you get punished for it. I mean that socially. What are your thoughts about what's let you build that strength? Laura, any thoughts on that?
I think that just like Janice was talking about with our last episode, I think it really depends on context again. So you may have found your two most transparent colleagues to discuss this this workout. So I think Janice and I are both pretty comfortable in general, sort of speaking what's on our mind, but that's not always true for me. And I realize that in some contexts, I'm much more willing to just say, be more vulnerable and say what I think. And in others, it's a lot harder for me. And so now I can't remember what your question was.
What has allowed you to strengthen the skill of
Oh,
sharing your thinking, sharing your goals, sharing your worries, sharing your feelings,
yeah, yeah.
in a appropriate and good way, obviously, but it's still awkward and can be
Yeah.
difficult.
One thing that has really made it easier for me to share when I feel vulnerable and has sort of empowered me to do that is when I've done that on a team at work. And afterwards, the residents or interns tell me how it landed on them and how much it helped them be more open about what they don't know or what they feel insecure about. It made me realize that it was such a powerful shift for the whole team. So it's made me much more conscious of doing it and even saying out loud, I'm modeling doing, sharing something that I'm a little bit scared to share. And so when I get that kind of feedback, it makes me realize how important that is for everyone, especially, as we get older, I think we get a little more confident with knowing what we know and knowing what we don't know and being more willing to share that and getting input from others. But, you know, um, I think our healthcare teams it's not natural. Like people get through competitive nursing and medical and other healthcare programs kind of by knowing a lot of right answers. And our system of education and training rewards people in a way that often makes us ill suited to be vulnerable and curious and collaborate because it's just such a different way of being rewarded. So I think we really have to build that in very consciously.
Thinking as we're talking about identity safety and the sociology, if you will, because I was trained in sociology, of sharing. So I'm a highly educated, white, privileged person with some position power and some authority granted because of my expertise in certain things. And I rarely feel psychologically unsafe to speak up. But people of color, people lower down on the status hierarchy, that's a sociological term that means like you have a less fancy job, um, often don't feel as comfortable sharing their points of view. And the risks can sometimes be higher depending on your status in the hierarchy. Wondering if either of you want to comment on that in any way, situations where you felt at greater risk or observed others at greater risk. I just feel it would be irresponsible to act like it's just all about individual um, strength.
I have so much going through my mind right now, but I'm going to throw this episode off. So I'm just not going to reply to that one
No,
right.
just go for it, Janice. We can deal.
Well, I don't think it's answering this particular question, but what I'm thinking about is the bias that, to Laura's point, I think there's a little bit of bias here in who's in this conversation, because I think we admire transparency and we prefer it, and so hence I love hanging out with Laura because of her modeling, and I learn from her modeling. I love hanging out with you, Jenny, because of your modeling, and I learn from your modeling. And I think that's what helps me be transparent is that I tend to surround myself with people I admire in that way. Um, and so there's a bit of a bias. And so now I'm thinking, what about the other people in the world who don't admire it and hate it? Who are
Well,
they surrounding themselves with? And how can we get them to want to be transparent and learn the skills? Because I think modeling is a very powerful way of learning.
well, Janice, I think that's extremely important, but there's a second part of it that again links sort of back to this what is socially safe to do. And there's a really great study of um, teaching people to speak up in an organization that had a fairly punitive set of practices and rules and culture. And so when people did speak up for the things they cared about or were transparent about what they cared about, instead of that benefiting them, that information was used against them. So I don't want to give the impression that every organization and every setting is safe for this. And hence, I use the analogy in the episode itself of saying, you need to do a scene assessment, like you were a paramedic, before you decide whether you're going to do something like this. So it's sort of like getting better at skiing, though, or at any tennis or any skill. Like if you want to get better at it, you have to hang around people who are even better than you at it, so you can mimic and copy them and rise to their level of play. Go ahead, Laura. What are you thinking?
So, I think that you're really spot on that our own perception of safety, the risk benefit profile of being willing to be vulnerable and speak up and share is very different for each person. And um, in order to cultivate that environment where it feels safe and that risk benefit ratio leans more towards safe, then we, if we're in a position of leadership, have to make it feel safe for people to be open and share, which does not happen by saying, this is a safe space, you can say anything. But of course, happens by the way we respond to each other. And as you said, the risk is higher when there's a power differential, when there's racism, when there's sexism, when there's other bias. So I can't pretend to know what it feels like to be taking those risks as someone else. I can only do what I can when I'm speaking with them to, make it feel like an environment that is safe and open and encouraging that kind of authenticity.
I have been in situations that felt unsafe, where I have felt racism and ageism and other isms, although there's isms everywhere. Um, and I would still argue, I mean, it's a little different. I still value the transparency in those moments, even though they didn't feel good in those moments. And I've it's taken me years to see the value in it, but I do see value in it, because I've learned from those experiences and I learn how people see other people. And to learn that it even exists has been wonderful for me, like eye-opening in a way where, it moves me to help others. Um, I think I have been in a very, very safe space where someone was very transparent with me and started off the conversation with um, like a very like I wouldn't say it was unsafe, but it was a hey, I have like the worst assumptions of you type beginning, and it threw me off. And again, took years for me to realize that I can see why that person saw it that way. Um, and so I don't know if I see any bad in transparency. I mean, it bad in the moment, yes. But years later, value. Can it have been done differently? Absolutely. But I would still prefer transparency over something that sounds rehearsed and not authentic. So I don't know, still struggle with that.
Hmm. So I think I'll wrap us up there with there are in the real world costs sometimes to being transparent. Um, there are benefits not only to ourselves, but to shaping the culture, and that there are kind of long term and short term impacts of it. Um, the reason we called the previous episode where we introduced this the greatest barrier to really great conversations is the alternative to being transparent and sharing what you're really thinking is a inefficient dialogue or culture supporting situation where we enhance indirectness and silencing and we weaken cultures where we can talk about what matters most. So this little teeny micro skill of imagining what might I be able to share here and or doing a safe modest test to try it is a way to build your muscles in this space. So this has been Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph here with Laura Rock. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And Janice Palaganas.
Thanks, Jenny.